Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for Sunday, the 7th of July, 2013. Tropics starting to get quite a bit more busy as we move through July here with that MJO pulse coming through as we suspected. So let's start off in the Eastern Pacific with some good news. Erick now down to a tropical storm. Winds are only 65 miles per hour. Pressure starting to go up. If we look at the forecast track over the next several days, you can see that it is going to continue to move away from the Mexican coastline, hopefully only brushing the southern part of the Baja Peninsula here. No direct impacts associated with this in terms of very high winds or any kind of hurricane force winds, anything like that. The water temperatures in this area a little bit too cool to support a hurricane at this time, so that's good news. Only a tropical storm warning is in effect for that area, and yeah, it's still going to bring some inclement weather. Don't write it off completely as being, oh, no big deal. Heavy rainfall with those bands that wrap around, an increase in surf, and people need to pay attention to that. Tropical storm warning in effect for the southern part of the Baja. Let's take a quick look at the satellite picture associated with Tropical Storm Erick, and you'll see that, especially if we look at the visible satellite shot, it's really not as well organized as it was, losing a lot of that deeper convection. I'll try to draw in here. You can see a few banding features trying to wrap back in, but overall, fighting the cooler water that's in this area, just not a good environment overall for the system, and it'll continue to lose its organization as it moves more towards the northwest, just passing by the Baja Peninsula. Then the rest of the Pacific here finally going to calm down. I don't see any other areas, neither does the Hurricane Center, that warrant any attention or concern right now, and that's good news, because as we go back to our main map here from the Hurricane Center, the Atlantic starting to get quite a bit more interesting. We now have a high chance of development with this area, Invest 95L, a tropical wave, very strong, and satellite images and wind data indicate that maybe a closed low-level circulation is starting to form with this system. If we look at a satellite animation of this, you can tell it's really starting to curl up and take advantage of the environment in which it's located. Strong trade winds blowing across there, keeping it moving pretty fast, 20 to 25 miles per hour as its forward motion. And I think you can easily tell what's going on with this system. Really starting to curl up here. It's got that classic look to it of a system that's trying to organize in its embryonic stage. And it's not going to take much for this to develop into a tropical depression. In fact, it may do so within the next 6 to 12 hours. Pretty large envelope of moisture associated with it. In other words, it's got a good energy packet. A moisture pouch is what some of the scientists call it. It's in its own sort of eggshell, if you will, of protection, with all of this moisture around it, keeping it away from this very dry air that is just to the north. That Saharan air layer, a big damper for hurricane development. But down here, where 95L is located, that is not the case, and it is able to maintain that deep convection, trying to develop a low-level circulation and move on off to the west-northwest here. So you folks in the Lesser Antilles need to be watching this. The Hurricane Center making mention that tropical storm watches and or warnings could be posted if this is indeed upgraded in the next little while. Recon hopefully going to be able to fly out there tomorrow. I think it flies out of Antigua, and it'll head out and investigate the system as it gets a little bit closer. With it moving so fast, it'll close the distance between itself and the Lesser Antilles. Now let's take a look at a couple of graphics here that are interesting. This is yesterday's vorticity map, and if you watched the video yesterday, you'll notice, and we're just going to pay attention to what's going on with 95L over here. This is the 5,000 foot vorticity map coming from the University of Wisconsin site, and you see yesterday the vorticity, and you say, well, Mark, what is vorticity? Well, it's the spin in the atmosphere, to put it in simple terms. And yesterday it was kind of oblong shape. It still is for the most part, but look at what it looks like today. Let's see, vorticity for today starting to get a little bit more rounded appearance, especially right in the middle of it. And that's what I'm looking for, to see if it starts to take on a much more rounded or concentrated appearance, and it's beginning to do so. It still has a lot of work to do, but I think that you can clearly see that there's a difference in what it looked like yesterday, which is this one, and what it looks like today. So that's starting to make a little bit of progress, and I think that's going to be the key here as it starts to bundle that energy around itself instead of having that vorticity or energy spread out over a large area, kind of like what you see here over the Great Plains with the energy stretched out over a larger area. Same thing with this storm system way up north here in the Canadian Maritimes and up towards Hudson's Bay and that region, wrapping all around this big storm system. Large spread out wind field. Tropical cyclones want to try to bundle that energy around a common warm center, and that's that vorticity signature that I'm looking for, and we're just starting to see that come into play. Where is it possibly headed? Let's take a look at the models. Computer model guidance suggesting for the next few days generally a track towards and then through the Lesser Antilles, and that's interesting because if it becomes a tropical storm, it could bring tropical storm conditions to this region in fairly short order, so people are going to want to be ready for that. Hopefully it won't ramp up too quickly. It's not in the best of environments. It's still July 7th, for goodness sake. It's not the peak of the hurricane season. Water temperatures and other environmental conditions out this way are not ideal, but just enough for this to try to develop some. In the longer term, it all depends on which models you look at. Some of them trying to turn it up towards the southeast United States, around the periphery, I guess, of a Bermuda High with maybe a break in the ridge between this high pressure area and the one over the western United States with a trough in the middle. Other models are not suggesting that. They have a more west-northwest track into the Caribbean, possibly threatening the greater Antilles, are going just south of there. There's Jamaica right there. And so make your own conclusion here that anybody, certainly from the Lesser Antilles out here through the greater Antilles, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba, and then the Bahamas, Jamaica included, everybody's going to want to watch this as it slowly develops, and hopefully it will be just slowly. An interesting several days ahead, to be sure. Now, the heat content, this is important. I really like to watch this. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this map better. Oceanic heat content, that's the true measure of how much energy is in the ocean. You have that warm surface layer, but then how deep into the ocean does that warm water extend? That's what I'm looking for. And the higher those values are, the brighter the colors are on the scale, the farther up the scale we go. So right now, the highest heat content values are sitting over here in the Western Caribbean, where they're normally expected to be. Very deep, very warm ocean waters there, providing a lot of fuel as these tropical cyclones come along. They mix up the ocean, and instead of bringing up colder water, they're just bringing up, with all that mixing, warm water. So the cycle continues to feed back on itself. Well, our system, 95L, is sitting out here where the heat content values are still in the lower third, but they are probably just a little bit above the average. And we know that when environmental conditions are ideal, as we saw a couple of times over the last few years when you had systems develop up in here in the subtropics, that you don't necessarily have to have high heat content to get a hurricane. But when you do have ideal conditions and ocean heat content that's very high, you can get very strong hurricanes. And all along the path that this system could take over the next several days, anywhere, we'll just try to draw some kind of a cone here, something like that. Heat content values still in the lower third of the scale, but they are there enough that it warrants concern that maybe, just maybe, this system will be something to reckon with in the days ahead. Hopefully not, and hopefully it won't be anything too strong. If it is, if it does get a name, it will be Chantal. Again, folks in the islands, you need to be watching this the closest. And then anything beyond that time frame, we've got plenty of time to watch, see what the reconnaissance aircraft finds when and if it flies out there, hopefully tomorrow, certainly by Tuesday, and we will know a lot more. So stay tuned, a lot's going on. Be sure to follow the updates to the maps and satellite pictures and whatnot in your app. We've got a wonderful set of tools there with Hurricane Pro and Hurricane HD, and I encourage you to use them. Any questions about anything, send an email, and the folks at Kitty Code will be glad to answer them. Maybe they can pass them along to me, and I can answer them in a future video blog. Well, have yourselves a good rest of your Sunday afternoon and evening. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, my website, hurricanetrack.com. Always an honor to be able to do these videos for you. Hopefully you'll learn something and know a little bit more about what's going on in the tropics. I'll have more for you tomorrow.